good.
All that befalls me is for my good.
I welcome any hurts that I receive.
I welcome any hurts that I receive
as opportunities to grow in understanding.
as opportunities to grow in understanding.
All that befalls me is for my good.
All that befalls me is for my good.
I welcome any hurts that I receive
I welcome any hurts that I receive
as opportunities to grow in understanding.
as opportunities to grow in understanding.
And softer, all that befalls me is for my good.
All that befalls me is for my good.
I welcome any hurts that I receive
I welcome any hurts that I receive
as opportunities to grow in understanding.
as opportunities to grow in understanding.
And a whisper, all that befalls me is for my good.
All that befalls me is for my good.
I welcome any hurts that I receive as opportunities to grow in understanding. And now silently broadcasting from the spiritual eye, the point between the eyebrows. All that befalls me is for my good. I welcome any hurts that I receive as opportunities to grow in understanding. Pray silently with me. Lord, how often the hurts that I've sustained in life have grieved me. Strengthen my power of love, that I surrender all things to Thee, my eternal friend. Oh, peace. So we welcome you all to our Sunday service, and we're going to start with a song.
Walk like a man, even though you walk alone. Why court approval once the road is known? Let come who will, but if they all turn home, the goal still awaits you. Go on alone.
Follow your dream, though it lead to worlds unknown. Life's but a shadow, once our dreams have flown. What if men cry, your dream is not our own? Your soul knows the answer. Go on alone. Give life your heart. Bless everything that's wrong. Fear not the loving. All this world's your own. Make rich the soil, but once the seed is sown, seek freedom, don't linger. Go on alone.
Join along with us.
Walk like a man, even though you walk alone. Why court approval once the road is known? Let come who will, but if they all turn home, the goal still awaits you. Go on alone. Go on alone. Go on alone.
This one last song before we have our Sunday service. Asha requested that I sing this song. This is a song by Swami Kriyananda entitled Emerald Isle.
Of course.
And It's sort of an Irish thing that we'll dedicate this to St. Patrick's Day. Come here while I sing you of emerald hills, of valleys and meadows so fair, that all who have seen them have carried away memories in their hearts, friend, like the lilacs of May. Oh, my song is the story, the lilacs of May. My song is the story of deer on the hills, of larks that soar sweeping the sun, of nightingales lifting the curtain of night, as with music they bring down heaven's blessing of light. Oh, my song is the story of God's blessing of light. Come join me in singing of that emerald isle, that flowers lush like jewels besprinkle the lea, of waterfalls eager to embrace the white sea, as we with our Maker reunited would be, as we with our Maker reunited would be. Come join me in singing, come here while I sing you of emerald hills, of valleys and meadows so fair, that all who have seen them have carried away memories in their hearts, friend, like the lilacs of May. Oh, my song is the story of the lilacs of May. Too bad lilacs don't grow in Los Angeles. You have lilacs?
You have to have the winter.
Yeah, they have to have the winter frost.
Going to read from Whispers from Eternity by Ananda. I bled, spreading thy name, and for thy name's sake I will ever bleed. With bloody limbs, broken body, wounded features, and bearing the thorn crown of derision, yet like a mighty warrior will I fight undismayed, even there where the skirmish is thickest. With the sword of calmness, I will stand firm against the hands of persecution. My disciplined armies of true aspiration, blowing trumpets in thy name, now march in triumph to seize the dark kingdom of God-denying souls. No matter how many blows I receive, and no matter how often the swords of persecution pierce my heart, I am content in the realization that thou knowest my craving to spread thy name. I will wear my tribulations not as scars, but as medals given for courage, and as inspirations to strive ever harder in my fight against ignorance. O Lord, help me conquer darkness with thy golden message of light. Be thou ever the general in my invasion of the continent of ignorance.
This is for week 10 from Rays of the One Light, Dogmatism versus Common Sense. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. In the Gospel of St. Matthew, chapter 7, Jesus warns, "Beware of false prophets, which come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravening wolves. Ye shall know them by their fruits. Do men gather grapes of thorns or figs of thistles? Even so, every good tree bringeth forth good fruit, but a corrupt tree bringeth forth evil fruit. A good tree cannot bear forth evil fruit, neither can a corrupt tree bring forth good fruit. Wherefore, by their faults ye shall know them. By their fruits ye shall know them. Excuse me. Jesus here, as indeed many times during his teachings, counsels people to use their God-given common sense and not to rely on high-flown but undemonstrable claims. Common sense goes beyond abstract reason, for it is rooted in actual experience. Even common sense, however, is deficient when the judgment called for goes beyond sensory experience. Ultimately, what he emphasized always, therefore, was intuitive perception. Thus, he expected more of his disciples than crude common sense, and often scolded them for being too literal-minded, as he did elsewhere when they thought his statement, "I have meat to eat that you know not of," meant that he had steaks or sandwiches secreted about his person. His reference, of course, was to spiritual, not material substance. Words, even though appearing in the scriptures, are no substitute for direct perception of truth. Therefore, the Bhagavad Gita says in the 2nd chapter, "The sage who knows God has as little need for the scriptures as one might have for a pond when the whole land is covered in flood." Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind.
The life of Jesus, he told his disciples toward the end, he told his disciples to eat my body and drink my blood. Subsequently, in all these centuries of Christianity, the church has taken that statement and made it into the ritual of the wine. It looks like blood, and here's the bread, and that's the body, and really the whole essence of especially the Catholic Church is built around that experience. And it's a valid experience. Great saints have affirmed it over and over again. Therese Neumann, who was the great mystic in Bavaria that Master wrote about, he visited her when he went through Europe in 1935. And she, every Friday, for a long time, she would relive the entire crucifixion of Jesus. Yogananda said she had actually been Mary Magdalene in a previous incarnation, and she had been there at the foot of the cross, and she just was still living through that. And even though it was agonizing for her, it was also ecstasy. Very, very strange story. And just to make it even more strange, she didn't eat. Therese Neumann. At a certain point, she just stopped eating, and she never took any food or water. Actually, when you read her biography, of which there are a few, all of that extreme strangeness is just balanced by a very joyful, childlike, very well-grounded person who just periodically would go and have these extraordinary experiences. Her saintliness is proven also by her very common sense nature. But also, the only thing she could eat was a consecrated wafer. And if it hadn't been consecrated, now I'm not an expert on Catholicism by any means, but at some point, somebody makes it out of flour and water, and it's just flour and water until it's consecrated, and then it becomes the Holy Host. But if it was still just flour and water and hadn't been through the ceremony of consecration, she couldn't eat it. I mean, and many people tested her in all kinds of ways, but she was actually having experiences. So what I'm saying is merely because something that was meant one way becomes a ritual does not mean the power isn't implanted in that ritual. But at the time that Jesus said it, there were no popes and there was no Catholic Church. In fact, there weren't even any Christians, they were just a whole bunch of Jews, all of them. Which is what I try to say to my Jewish friends, don't blame Jesus for anything that happened. He was just a rabbi. As a Jew, you do not have to feel that you can't also be devoted to Christ, because there was no choice when he was there. And in fact, it only became Christianity when the Jews weren't interested anymore. He was a rabbi who suggested something that was outside of the orthodoxy, and after he died, his disciples were not able to persuade them. And so they were vanished, basically. And Paul was not willing to just go off quietly into the night, so he went to find somebody who would listen. And the people who would listen were the pagans, the Gentiles, and that's how they divided. But going back to this, when Jesus was at the end of his life, he knew what was coming. He knew that the crucifixion was going to come and that, it was going to be tough. It was going to be a very tough story after that. It wasn't going to be just a matter of, I can just go along with this, it's a little radical, but lots of other people think so, and I can still go home to my family at night and nobody's going to kill me. So it's fine. But Jesus knew that the whole game was going to shift in a different way. And so he needed to make sure that the people who were with him at the end and afterwards would have the power to stand up against that. Also in the life of a master, it's very interesting because this was also true in Yogananda's life. He could hold people with his magnetism that really did not have the strength to hold to the path without that encompassing energy. And in other words, their spiritual karma for that incarnation was going to be done when the master left the body. Not done for eternity or any means, but just the cycle. But we have a lot of cycles. So at the end of Master's life also, he started purging things. He started making it more difficult, raising the bar, making it harder for people. I mean, among other things, he had Swami Kriyananda organize the monastery. In all the years that Yogananda had lived in America, it was always just, there was no organization to it. People could just come and kind of be there in however way they wanted to be there and do whatever they thought. And all the relationships were just directly to Master. And on one hand, you might say, and people did say, he was not a good organizer. But Swamiji said he realized he was a master organizer. He just organized it entirely with his magnetism. And he didn't really want anything to interfere between himself and his direct relationship. But he knew, Master knew the end was coming. And so he asked Swamiji to begin organizing. At which point a lot of those monks left, because it just wasn't their way to be part of that. And that's what Master wanted. You understand, he wasn't casting them out of his heart. It's just the needs of the work were going to be different. So Jesus is there, and he starts saying to his disciples, eat my body and drink my blood. And he doesn't introduce it. Master didn't explain either. He just creates magnetism, creates a reality, and then each disciple has to find within themselves, what is the truth of this for me? What is my actual relationship to this path? Why am I on this path? What do I really believe? So Jesus stood there and told them to eat his body and drink his blood, and didn't explain that this was symbol for the ages. He just put it there. Now Master explains it metaphysically. The body is the vibration of Om, because Jesus was not his physical body, he was one with the infinite. The Om was his body, he was omnipresent. So to eat my body is to absorb into yourself the Om. To drink my blood, he said, the life force animating him was the Christ consciousness. So he was actually telling his disciples to rise to my level of consciousness and to become who I am. But he didn't explain it. Now, on one hand, the way people would look at that would be to think, this guy's lost his mind. And most people would see that as a test of whether or not Jesus knew what he was talking about. Because we tend to be the center of our own universe, don't we? And we tend to kind of like what we think. We like our own ideas. I'm very fond of my own ideas. In fact, to my own amusement and utter embarrassment, because I've been living in community for 45 years and have had a lot of responsibilities and been in lots of meetings, I've always been surprised that after I express my opinion, they keep discussing the question. It's been sort of subliminal with me. But there's always been this slight puzzlement, like, I have spoken. But it finally came to the surface. I mean, it's not that other people couldn't feel it, because they could also feel why are you still talking, even though it was quiet. But that's just, we all like our own ideas. So we tend to take our filter and then we impose it on the world. I don't understand what he's saying, therefore he doesn't know what he's talking about. Becoming a disciple, you see, is a big step. Swami Kriyananda himself talked about that. Just, he was never willing to take anyone's word for anything. And it may appear to be arrogance, and it could be arrogance, but for Swamiji it really wasn't. He was just a very, he had great discernment. And he wasn't really putting anyone else down. It's just that he didn't really find anyone he could trust more than he could trust his own perception until he met Master, and then the conversion was instant and total. And he describes his first days in the monastery, because he knew nothing. This is 1948. This wasn't when, it's all over the place like it is now. He knew nothing. He thought the word yoga must be the word yogurt. He thought it was a kind of yogurt. And Guru was just outside the realm of possibility. But within a week, he's a disciple of the great master and the monk in his ashram. And he still couldn't understand anything. And he would hear the most outlandish things. Some of it was just made up by people. But he would always ask, did Master say that? And then no matter how impossible it seemed for Swamiji's own discernment, he said he would accept it. If he couldn't understand it, he wouldn't just swallow it whole and become brainless, but he would not resist it. He would just accept it. Master said it must be true. Now, how on earth did he come to that? Or how in heaven or earth did Swami come to that understanding? Well, let's go back to the disciples of Jesus. What's really being tested is not Jesus' understanding of the teachings. It's the disciples' capacity to trust their own experience. Because by that point, the people he's talking to are the people he's directing his comments to. We don't know in the Bible. Most of what's in the Bible was more public, and in a few places it'll say, and he took the disciples apart and spoke to them. So we don't really know who he said, what he said to whom, and how and where and when, which is actually very important in understanding the Master's teachings. Because to someone who has just walked in the door, the Master will say one thing. To someone who has committed his life and given Master permission to transform his consciousness, he will obviously give different advice. Earlier this morning I was saying, when people would ask Swamiji, do I need a guru? Swamiji would often answer, even though the answer is yes, everyone needs a guru to ultimately to find God. But Swami would often answer, not if you don't think so. Meaning, if you're not ready for a guru, why am I going to tell you even? Why am I going to waste my words trying to persuade you? It was interesting with Swamiji. He would share endlessly. He would just give all day and all night. But if people were not interested, he would just become just completely silent. I was in many situations with him where people simply didn't have what he had to offer. What he didn't want what he had to offer. Of course, they didn't have it either. But what did they want it? And if they didn't want it, and also I observed he never argued with anyone. You know, intellectual people argue all the time. Well, this is what I think is true. Well, I don't understand. Well, this is the reason, and this is this. You know, and then make an effort to persuade by convincing him. And never saw Swami argue with anyone ever in that respect. If they posited an objection, and it wasn't just a striving to understand, which is different. Help me to understand. It was, I don't believe that. We'd be all right. You know, the lovely weather we're having here, isn't it? In San Francisco, we always say, how about them 49ers? You know, that's always when this conversation is not going anywhere. We say, how about the Niners this year? Swami, of course, never said that. But just let go away from it. Because if it isn't your own experience, it's not going to hold anything. So here's Jesus. He knows what's coming, the crucifixion and all that follows. He wants people to know where they stand and why. So he deliberately as Master explains it, spoke in a way that was incomprehensible with reason. The only way you could understand it is if you knew who was speaking. And the only way you could know who was speaking is because you had experienced it in your life. And that was Swamiji with Master. He read Autobiography of a Yogi, and he just knew. He saw Master's picture, and he just knew. He tells the story, it's so touching. He tells the story of finding the autobiography in the bookstore in New York. First time rejecting it, but then being drawn magically, mystically back and buying the book. And he says he's holding the book in his hand and he reads one of his acquaintances, one of his schoolmates. And this schoolmate is now starting on his big career and is going to make lots of money and he's going to be a big guy here and there. And he's talking about his big future. And Swamiji describes how he was holding the autobiography and he was holding Master's picture against his heart. And he had just taken the book off the shelf. But he said suddenly this strange yogi and I were partners in my life. And this man who represented Swami's whole life up until that point had become the outsider. Now, none of that comes from reasoning this out. Swami hadn't even read the book. But he just knew. And at one point or another on the spiritual path, that's what we shift into. We just shift into the fact that this is the word actually is beyond reason. That doesn't mean that it doesn't include reason. Because if that kind of commitment is just emotional, it's just happening on the surface. Well, I used to be this and now I'm this, and I used to be this and now I'm this. This man complained to Swami Kriyananda once. He said he described himself as very Gemini in the sense of always being interested in new things. And he said that I followed, at that point, he followed already a number of paths. And he said, I get so excited and I'm so inspired and I'm doing these new things and then I learn it like this. And he said, but I come back around and then I find myself right where I started. And so I find a new one in order to go on. And Swami remarked, I loved his answer. He said, yes, he said, but it feels so fulfilling while I'm doing it. And Swami says, yes. He said, going in circles does give you a certain sense of accomplishment. He said, the bigger the circle, the greater the sense of accomplishment. But there's a certain point where it just transfers into something else. And then even when the Master says to you, as Jesus said, things that you can't really understand, it's like you don't need that. It's not because you've suspended your reason, it's that because something else is also true. And this is the story in the Bible where the Bible says after Jesus started speaking like this to the disciples said one to another, I read the Jerusalem Bible, which is not the best translation, but it's the holiest translation. And it reads like a novel. I never could read the Bible until I read the Jerusalem Bible, just as a recommendation, you might like it. And it says, the disciples said one to another, this is hard teaching. Did you just see it? I mean, you're all walking out here, you go to lunch, and you say, did you think what she said was a little wacky? And then you start supporting each other in the fact that this is a little wacky, and there's another yoga center a few places down there. Maybe they're a little less crazy in there. And a lot of people left, which was Jesus' exact intention. You know, I'm not here for those of you who are just here because it's comfortable. I want to know who you are. And as I started to say before, what he was testing was the disciples' faith in their own intuition and experience. Because there is no path except your inner reality. There is no life really except our inner reality. We're always in our inner reality, but there is no path except our inner reality. People will come and the more Ananda gets organized, and Ananda Los Angeles is now just sort of taking this big step into actually looking like something, which we're really happy for, which is always a wonderful thing and a disaster. Because as soon as we look like something, then people begin to think what we look like is what we look like. And I live in Palo Alto, where we have this beautiful old, it used to be a Catholic church, it's now our church, and it's really beautiful. And people come in, and it's, because we're marvelously left brain there, everything runs on copper. And then people start saying to me, well, I don't like organized religion. I said, well, would you prefer disorganized religion? Oh, I understand. You think because this looks like something, that's what it is. See, this is nothing. I mean, this church, the fact that we're so good at systems and making it all run, and we're not really, but there's a very thin facade that we live. You actually think that that's what's going on here? None of that is happening. The only thing that's happening is you are feeling the inspiration of spirit in your heart, or you are not. Garrison Keillor, who's not known as a religious philosopher, but he contributed this great gem to religious philosophy. Thinking that you can become a Christian by sitting in a church is like going into your garage and trying to become a car. And that's really it. It's either inside of you or it isn't. And if you are sincere in your true quest for God, and if you have sincerely opened yourself to the guidance of any expression of the divine, these masters or any masters, they will make sure that you learn the difference. And one way or another, they will keep putting in front of you the opportunity to test your own faith and your own intuition. And don't mistake that for a test of whether or not the path is valid. And so in the Bible, when they thought the teaching was wacky and many walked with him no more at that point, Jesus turned to Peter. And you can see it as in real life. You can see it. Jesus just turned to Peter and he said, will you too leave me? Just curious. How are you doing, Peter? Peter denied Jesus 3 times afterwards. So even though Peter became absolutely stalwart, he had a little bit of karma to work out there. So, Peter, what are you going to do? And Jesus didn't offer big long explanations. Let me give you a hint here. He just said, what are you going to do? And Peter's answer, perfection itself. He said, Lord, where would I go? That moves me more than almost any other line in the Bible. Because you see, Peter had no idea either what Jesus was talking about. But he also knew that at this point, I know who you are, and I know who I am in relation to you. As Swamiji often said about master, he said sometimes people would sort of talk about, is this master greater than that master? Is this one can do this and that one can do that? And Swamiji said it's like going out shopping for a mother. He said you have the one you have. And it belongs to you. Your mother might not have been the best or the greatest, but she's the one you have. He said, Master was mine. He said it desecrated the relationship to try to act as if I was shopping for the best one. This is where I belonged and nothing could move me. And be assured, if it hasn't happened to you already, it absolutely will come to you. Master said the test of negativity is essential on the spiritual path. At some point, someone will come, something will come, and try to persuade you that you are wrong. And they'll give you all the sites on the internet to tell you that they're wrong. I can give them to you too, if you want to think about Ananda. We went through, starting in 1990, we went through 12 years of litigation, ending with just a fantastic sexual harassment, character assassination lawsuit. Just fantastic. It was like out of the movies. In fact, Swami has asked me to make a movie of it someday, which I can. Not just the lawsuit, but the whole thing. Because by the grace of God, I'll be able to. In which they said that everything about Ananda was not what it seemed. We were, in fact, the most nefarious possible cult. You name it, we did it. Every day. And, people were freaking out. And the trial on that particular thing, which did not go well for us, as Swamiji says, but absolutely, the law of averages says that at least some things will go right for you. When absolutely everything goes wrong, Divine Mother is behind. So absolutely everything went wrong. And from the worldly point of view, it did not end well. And it happened 3 miles from our community. And it was in the papers every day. So people would come to me, like this, about, are we in fact this horrible cult? I don't know, I would say, I don't know, what do you think? Because what can I say? If I say, no, we're not, no, we're not, no, we're not. And the next day someone says, yes, you are, yes, you are, yes, you are. It's just like, I don't know what to do. You know me, you know us. We've been here for years. What do you think? And of course, what happens then? Well, maybe there's something. What's being tested? The validity of the teaching or the power of you to trust your own experience? That's why it's absolutely essential from the beginning on the spiritual path that you have this particular peculiar balance. And this peculiar balance is you're absolutely open to ideas that you've never considered. And you don't close down to that tiny little channel that we've always lived in. That even though it's miserable, we defend to the death. We really defend, right? So you're absolutely open. But at the same time, you're absolutely sincere. So that if you don't get it, you don't get it. But you don't feel you have to back up that, I don't get it, that must be wrong. And it's not easy. Swamiji said so many things to me over the years that I didn't know what to do with them. So I would box them up and I would put them in that corner of your closet, which is way out, so that you haven't thrown it away. Your Aunt Mildred gave it to you and you might come to visit someday. But you sure don't want to look at it. And so I just had this mental show. And over the years and the decades, darn it, and there's just really, I don't think there's a thing he ever said to me that didn't eventually, by my own experience, prove to be true. So that's the path we have to walk. Absolute sincerity, absolute openness. But realize we can only be who we are. And then have the courage to feel what we feel. And have the courage to stand by it. Sri Yukteswar had this wonderful way of saying, he says, if people dispute you, don't argue with them, just like, oh, perhaps you're right. Which I love, because you've conceded nothing, because, I don't know, perhaps they are right. But you've also ended the argument. Just, I don't know. But I was saying, the test of negativity will come. And you'll weather it, and it'll either be a big deal in your life or a tiny deal in your life, depending on what the foundation is that you built. How have you built this? With that combination of openness and courage, integrity and sincerity, and even if your progress seems inch by inch, every inch of that will belong to you. And as Sister Gyanamata said, you'll always be able to retreat to the solid ground of your own experience, whatever that might be. Mine was, I met Swami Kriyananda and I just knew. Swami Kriyananda's was the net master, he just knew. Sometimes people walk in and they hear a certain song and they just know. This belongs to me. And if you can never get off that spot, just hang out there. Because there's more power in that than anything that you can go spin on. And then step by step. And I really do not know how it happens. I have no idea how it happens. I was saying this last night. I don't know how spiritual progress takes place. I really can't tell. But I know that it does. That you feel like you're standing still or even going backwards. But then a year passes, and 10 years passes, and a lifetime passes. Wow, look at that. You're just somebody else. Because you keep your eye on the goal and never give up.